Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. My name is Melanie Leslie. I'm the Dean at Cardozo Law School and the recently elected chair of the section for the Law School Dean. And this section is co-sponsored with the section for academic support. And boy, what a year we have had. It has been an amazingly challenging year for all administrators, especially student-facing ones. And for those of you who deal directly with students, I empathize with you and also thank you for the critical work you've been doing tirelessly this year. But I think we can all agree that as hard as this has been for us, it's been incredibly difficult for our students, and in particular the class of 2021. 2020 and probably 2021, who have gone through in the end of their third year the incredible upset of the pandemic hitting, combined with the, in many cases, inability to have an actual live graduation, and then the craziness that surrounded the bar exam as the summer went on. And so today we're going to hear from some deans and some experts in student mental health about how they responded to these events, so that we can all get some tips and some helpful assistance about how we might continue to support our students. And then we also would like to maybe broaden the discussion a little bit later to talk more broadly about how we can continue to support our students and continue to try to do what we can to make sure that their mental health isn't suffering more than we want it to, I guess. And so we really do welcome all of your questions in the chat. I see we lost some people. The links were switched. So we lost some people once I said which section this was. So we may be getting some people here in a minute. Okay. But at any rate, I'll just continue. So anyway, welcome. Let me introduce our panel. We have, when I introduce you, would you just wave, please? Heidi Alexander, who is Massachusetts' first director of the Supreme Judicial Court Standing Committee on Lawyer Well-Being. We have Susan Duncan, who is the Dean of the University of Mississippi College of Law. Marcy Lynn Burke, who is the Dean of the University of Oregon College of Law. And Paul Ruiz, I've misspelled your name here, Raul. Sorry about that. Raul Ruiz, Assistant Dean for Bar Exam Preparation and Assistant Professor of Academic Support at Florida International University. So welcome to all of you. I'm sure you're going to have a lot to share with us. It's going to be really helpful. So let's start at the top. If each of you, and I'll just call on you individually, could say a little bit about what happened in your state around the bar exam, because I know in New York, where I sit, there was an incredible amount of uncertainty and anxiety as the bar exam was postponed at the last minute, then postponed again, and then ultimately in October postponed and flipped into an online bar exam. So can you, we'll start with Marcy Lynn. Why don't you tell us about Oregon, what happened there? You're muted, yeah.
All right, good morning or good afternoon. And yes, in Oregon, the Supreme Court decided in June to create a diploma privilege for our 2020 graduates. And that was the end point, and a lot happened before that. But I think that one of the keys was that the three law schools in Oregon started working with our board of bar examiners very early in the pandemic. It was a very long process where we were all trying to get to the best result for our students and soon to be graduates. And so there were a number of moves that were made to try to make sure that the bar exam was going to be possible. And as the situation grew worse, along with the protests and marches and the social upheaval that occurred over the summer, that the three deans thought it was incumbent upon us to petition the Supreme Court First, we petitioned the Board of Bar Examiners, and it was their legal conclusion that they did not have the legal authority to grant the diploma privilege. And so we moved to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court thankfully granted that request.
Thank you. And Susan.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are very different than Oregon was. So again, I'm in Mississippi, and we went ahead and had an in-person test on the regular date in July. But we have much smaller numbers than many of you probably. So of all the takers, there was 117 takers at that administration. So very small. Our school only had 34 of those takers as first-time takers. I think we had 4 retakers and 34 takers. So a lot of our students did go to other jurisdictions. So it's interesting to support them because, for the ones that were taking it in person on time in Mississippi, we had to do certain things. And then for the ones that were in other jurisdictions, completely other types of support. But we luckily got through the July exam, and nobody, I think, got COVID, and it was raging then in Mississippi. But, again, when you have such few takers, they could really spread them out, and it did okay, I think.
Thanks, Susan. I'm going to interrupt for one moment and ask if there's a tech support person on this call, because I'm looking when I've entered as an attendee, I'm seeing slides for a different section, which appears to be law, medicine, and healthcare and minority groups. So that is what I'm seeing, and I'm not able to see any questions or attendees for this section. Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion in the chat there about who's in which section and where they are. So I don't know if there's an IT person here, but if we could get a little help. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the correct feed has now been put in place. So we may have people joining us. We'll see. Okay, so where was I? Marshall and Susan and Heidi, what happened in Massachusetts?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So let me just preface this with the fact that I am not in legal education, and so my perspective is slightly different here. I don't work within the law school, but I do work with a law student and law school subcommittee as part of my committee, which is really looking more at sort of systemic changes based on our committee report. But I do have lots of information about what happened for our bar exam. Our exam in Massachusetts was postponed to October, and it was both online and remote. And it was the abbreviated version, along with 13 other states. And our executive director of our Board of Bar Examiners worked out a reciprocity arrangement with each of those 13 states. And what's actually very interesting is that the pass rate was up at least 5.2% on this particular exam. And one theory I have heard is that although there was a lot of anxiety around the changes to the exam, there was less anxiety the day of the exam because people felt more comfortable actually being in their home or being by themselves where they didn't have any distractions. And if they did have distractions, many of them were able to work with our BBE to find space in the law schools. And the other thing I will say is that our exam did, like some of the other remote exams, use facial recognition to authenticate the test user and also AI proctoring. And what they did was they configured the facial recognition so that if there was a discrepancy with the authentication, the test taker was actually not aware of that at the time. Because you can imagine if you're taking the test and there's an authentication issue and you're about to take it and you're flagged there, that's going to create a lot of anxiety. So all those problems were actually resolved after the fact. And that was primarily with people that were taking it in the law schools, and they were wearing masks that covered half of their faces. The AI proctors flagged about 1,000 cases, and all those were reviewed by humans. And so there was actually no allegations of cheating, even though that was a major concern with the online exam. So going into the February exam, it's also going to be remote, and likely the July exam will be remote as well, but it will be the full UBE. So that's a lot of time sitting and doing this remote over 2 days. So double the length of October. So that's what happened here.
Thank you, Heidi. And Heidi did a nice job of starting to flag some of the challenges that were presented by the bar exam. And I am going to go back to Marcy, Lynn, and Susan to talk about those. But before I do that, Raul, just can you give us an update on what happened with the Florida bar?
Sure, and good afternoon, everyone. So Florida was quite the roller coaster. We had our bar exam canceled 2 days before it was supposed to be administered for our students in July. This was the time when COVID was raging in Florida and across the country. The bar examiners had actually attempted to split the bar exam into 2 different locations to compensate and be able to impose social distancing requirements. So we typically have the exam in Tampa, but they actually split students between Tampa and Orlando. But what ended up happening as the summer progressed was that the Orlando site became a COVID testing center. So 2 days before the exam was canceled. It was rescheduled, and then it was canceled again the second time because they were having issues with the Exam 360 software. The exam was finally scheduled for the third time using the ExamSoft software. But while the Florida bar examiners did drop the MBE portion of it, meaning the exam will only be 1 day state law, they did change the testing format for that section. So they were testing subjects in different modalities that they hadn't tested previously. So it did throw a couple of students off. Not to mention, a good number. I mean, it's not half, but a significant number of our students, in my opinion, contracted COVID, and that really affected a lot of them. So there were plenty of issues going around, from the stress of when the exam would happen, the testing format, what subjects would actually be tested, and just health concerns.
Thank you. Marceline, you're lucky. You're one of the lucky ones in a way, because the Florida Supreme Court was so responsive and adopted diploma privilege and some other ways to make things easier for people. But nonetheless, I know you think there were still challenges. Can you just talk a little bit about the challenges for your graduates? And then what did you, as a dean, what can you do, and what did you do to try to make it easier for them as they confronted these unusual challenges?
Yes. So as I said, it was a long journey to get to the diploma privilege. And so one of the things that we did was really important to stay in constant communication with the Board of Bar Examiners. So every week we met with the Board of Bar Examiners, and we could convey our students' concerns, as well as then be able to relay the most up-to-date information to our students. So it was important to be in constant communication with both our students and with the Board of Bar Examiners. Then, while all of this was swirling around, we had to work really hard to keep our students motivated to continue to study and to continue to work hard. And that was really difficult, as we were all hoping that they would be able to suspend those studies, but not knowing until June, which, they were well into their bar preparation. So continuing to do the same sort of bar prep with our academic success program, academic excellence program, and continuing to work with them, and also helping them if they had any special needs or accommodation requests that they needed. We also needed to expand the number of test locations, as was the case in Florida. The reason being that because Oregon announced very early on that it was going to proceed with an in-person UBE, we received more people registered to take the bar in Oregon than in history. And so the bar was going to have to cut off, limit the number of people who could register. And that might have meant that some of our own students here in Oregon wouldn't have been able to sign up for the bar. So each of the law schools committed to providing space so that everyone could be accommodated. So in the 3 law schools in Oregon are in Portland, Salem, and Eugene. And so that was actually going to be a very positive outcome, I think, indeed, for our own students to be able to take it in their own law school. That actually might have lowered some anxiety in, understanding the facility and understanding the needs and that sort of thing. But I think really the challenge was the uncertainty. And, we were all feeling the upheaval this summer in so many different ways. But, I can't even begin to imagine what it would feel like also preparing for the most high stakes exam of your life during the midst of all of those things. So our students are quite phenomenal and thoughtful in their approaches. And we just really try to, continuously be in contact with them, let them know that we were working on their behalf. And at the same time, knowing that there were no guarantees that we would prevail in getting the diploma privilege for them. And I said one other thing, we already had a student practice rule in Oregon, but one of the things that required, I believe, is that you had taken evidence. And so that was another thing that we had to work past, because not all of our students, most of our students take evidence, but not all of them. And to work with the Board of Bar Examiners to remove that requirement, if that's, ultimately where we had landed.
Great. Now, Raul, you're famous in law school circles because your law school has an outstanding bar pass record. And I have a feeling, given your title, that it has something to do with you. And so can you talk specifically about how you kept students motivated through this? How did you keep them from giving up? And both in terms of psychological support, but also how did you handle the fact that you had certain prep going on for the bar that then, did you keep it going once there was an emergency cancellation? So give us your words of wisdom so that we can learn from them.
Well, I appreciate that, but I can't take all the credit. It's the students. I tell people you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And a lot goes to our students. And, part of what I do is to ensure that our students continue to be motivated and continue to see the path to success on their bar exam, which for me is really the Florida bar exam, because about 99% of our students take Florida. But, when it started with COVID, the real concern with students was, I don't want to go to a place where I might get this virus. Completely understandable. I didn't want to go with them to Tampa either. And so once they delayed the exam, it became a situation where burnout was my real concern. Because burnout comes from a couple of different actions or tasks that you do in your life, not the least of which is sheer monotonous repetition of something. So practice essays, practice questions, reviewing lectures, all the things that go into their typical bar exam preparation period, that would really take a toll on them. And so it became a situation where I, being the non-expert on how to do bar prep during a pandemic, had to figure out and learn about how to mitigate issues associated with burnout. And so what I started doing with students was I started creating customized schedules for them apart from what their Barbary Themis programs were telling them to do. And it was something that was geared more towards an elongated period of time. My theory being that what they're going to test on the bar exam is going to be the same thing they were going to test 2 or 3 weeks before the bar exam was scheduled, right? It's just a date that changed. So it became a process of integrating breaks for students, integrating spacing for students. But it also became a period where I started engaging students more directly, let me rephrase that, more broadly with students. And I would have them start meeting through online sessions to encourage them to see their peers online, to see me, to interact with other people, and know that they were not alone in this process, and keep hammering that message of, the exam's going to be the same thing you were going to take a few weeks ago. Nothing has changed. Now, once they delayed it a second time, the good thing is, they dropped the MBE. And so my message to them was, well, this is now going to be an easier bar exam. So it just became this messaging. Now, I didn't know if it was going to be an easier bar exam because they didn't tell me how they were going to scale the new exam. Now that the MBE wasn't there, there were a lot of variables that the bar examiners did not make me or our deans privy to. So it became the whole fake it till you make it type of thing, where you just had to tell your students it's going to be okay. You have to guide them. Now, that seemed to work for a vast number of them, but for a lot of students started facing emotional issues, which I know Heidi's going to get into. But once you started seeing emotional issues on the sides of the student, it was time for me to start recommending them to our student health services, where they could provide online virtual mental health counseling and other services to them, because I just don't feel qualified to do anything like that. But it really became about the messaging and preventing burnout. It worked for a good number of our students, but I can tell you a few of them actually ended up burning out because of this whole process. The issue with the jobs, we didn't have a diploma privilege. That was out of the realm of possibilities at that time. And I'm talking students at the top of their class that this happened to. So it was a real danger, and it was something that, going forward, even for this February exam and this July exam, we're going to have to continue that messaging, because these online exams and online studying is introducing that concept of solitude and potential burnout.
Great. Susan, your exam went on as scheduled in the middle of a pandemic. Did you have any particular challenges with your students, and how did you address them?
So the first challenge is we couldn't get an answer from Mississippi forever. So the Supreme Court was worried about the courts and just operating. So they were so tied up in those kind of decisions through the spring that we were seeing other states tell the students what they were going to do. And Mississippi was just not responding at all. So we couldn't, that was very, caused a lot of anxiety among those Mississippi bar takers, because they didn't know, should they start studying? I think even it was post-graduation, we still didn't know. And so we didn't know if they should start to study or not. So that was frustrating. And so we could get the answer. The other thing I would say is that we were dealing with students, over half the class was taking it in other jurisdictions. So we were running into, like, Tennessee said they were only going to allow Tennessee law school graduates to take it. Well, we have a lot of people that grew up in Tennessee, being in northern Mississippi. So all of these Memphis residents who had lived there forever weren't going to be able to take it. And I wrote to the Supreme Court and just didn't even receive a response. So that was frustrating that we couldn't give them answers, even though we were advocating sometimes. I think that the best thing we did is we have a designated person for bar passage support, Katie Hester, who's phenomenal. And so she was able, like I've heard other panelists say, make certain schedules for individual students, because we might have one in Montana taking it and one in another state. So she really worked closely with the individual students and was a great advocate for them, and kept me informed if I needed to write letters or take it up the chain. So she was essential, I think, to keeping everybody calm.
Great. Just if there is an IT person still here, still in the section, it's the other section slides, and I think maybe the other section's chat that I'm seeing, and I don't know if I should log back in. So just putting that out there. And if there aren't any audience questions, we'll just keep talking. Heidi, do you have anything to add in terms of things? We're not out of the woods yet in this pandemic. We have a lot of students retaking in February. And we don't know what's going to happen this summer and how long it's going to take for a vaccine to really be widespread. So I think we're going to be dealing with supporting students through this kind of uncertainty for some time to go. Do you have any additional suggestions about how we might help them in terms of their mental health through this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just echo a couple of things that have been said. Similar to Marceline, our director of Board of Bar Overseers started it with like basically a tour of law schools and bar associations, where she gave very short 15-minute presentations with 45 minutes Q&A. I got to sit in on one of those, and it was just, fast action questions to her from the students. I mean, one after the other. And she talked about how the exam was going to work, what changes were being made, what should you expect, how to get an accommodation, how was the AI going to work, all these things that, I think, for what I do personally, it reduces the level of stress and anxiety and helps increase the students' well-being. So I think that's really important. And then also, having these weekly meetings with the deans to answer questions from the deans and provide specific answers to help the students. So I think that's really important. Like you said, this certainly is continuing, and we did see there's some data the third week of July on mental health and the impact of the pandemic on mental health. The National Center for Health Statistics found that 36% of adults were exhibiting signs of anxiety disorder, 30% exhibiting signs of depressive disorder, and 40 to 50% were feeling burnt out. So, Raul mentioned this, 60% of adults feeling more tired than ever. So certainly, it's very, very difficult. And certainly students were feeling the impact of this as well. I do think that, sort of going back to what Raul said, he mentioned that, he didn't feel qualified to sort of deal with some of those mental health issues. And this is something that I think, is a really important point, because I think it's the way that a lot of faculty think as well. Like, what can I do specifically for my law students when I am not trained to be a mental health clinician, right? But faculty and administrators you are there to sort of solve some of their problems, but not all of their problems, right? So part of what people can do is to, validate that it is okay for students to ask for help. That's not a sign of weakness. There are other things that they can do. So, for example, I heard a couple of anecdotes from our professors here in Massachusetts. One professor spent the first 5 minutes of each class sharing sort of well-being tips and techniques with students. So she actually put together a weekly technique that she would share with their students. And then she also, which I think is even more important, is she shared her own personal experience. And that, I think, really helps to kind of reduce some of the stigma so that students can actually reach out and get help when they know that, hey, look, there's someone that's really successful, or there's a dean, or there's a faculty member who, is also experiencing stress, right? And so that's important. Sorry, I was just getting some feedback there.
I'm trying to fix the tech problem.
No problem. So I do think that, part of it is being aware of the students, making sure that, you're asking questions and communicating with them. I think the other important piece, and I saw some law schools doing a really great job of this in the spring and in the fall, is focusing on addressing the basic needs as sort of number one, right? Housing and food, right? So many people lost their jobs. Many people were without housing. And we saw that, with a number of the folks who took the bar exam. And so I think those are the issues that schools need to make sure that they are addressing first, because that's going to have a huge impact on their ability to succeed in the bar and transition into practice. And then, of course, there are other issues that compound the stress. And I saw some law schools doing a survey of students, sort of a listening tour. What do students need during this time? Do they have other obligations? Are they taking care of a parent or a child? Do they have other distractions in their household? Are they in jeopardy of failing because of an attendance policy? So one of the things that I think people can do, and certainly faculty can do, is try to be a little bit more flexible in attendance policies that will actually take into account students' mental health needs and personal situations. I saw people extending deadlines, checking in on students who didn't show up instead of just giving that, just failing them out, right? And then the other piece is that I know some schools have actually shortened their not shortened, but shortened their breaks in the spring. So some of the schools in Massachusetts have actually gotten rid of a break altogether. That's really tough for students, right? That is really tough because you're not giving them a break at all. So one suggestion I heard was to just sort of lessen the load, at least for that week, right? Maybe, one assignment or, just so that they have a little bit of space, because I think having that break, and also having faculty members say, it's okay, take a break, right? Make sure that you are taking a break from your studies. So those are just a few things that I would recommend going into the spring.
That's very helpful. We fixed the technical issue and the questions are popping up. So I'll just pick up on one, which Heidi, you were leading into, a question about how to best support February 2021 takers. This person is hearing from many people who feel like the online exam format is unrealistic in terms of being able to read, digest, and utilize complex online problems. In short, they feel that they've expressed that they feel like the bar examiners are not hearing them with this respect to this online issue. And ESL takers are especially worried about taking the online exam. So question about how do we alleviate the stress coming up here in 2021? Heidi, some of the things that you said are really great takeaways that we can keep using. Does anyone else have thoughts about that on the panel?
I can give it a shot if you'd like. The preparation for the February exam started last semester, and I think it was a pretty safe bet that most every jurisdiction or larger jurisdiction wasn't going to have the bar exam in person. And so one of my big beliefs is that you need to practice how you're going to perform. And so if you are overseeing students that are taking the February bar exam, they need to start doing or practicing their materials completely online on the computer. Even though they have, for example, Barbary Kaplan Themis books, and ordinarily I would tell people do all your questions in the book because it's going to be handwritten. I now tell them do all your questions online. And they're going to complain that it's unfair. And that is, I agree with them that it's unfair. It's like trying to play blindfolded chess with some of these questions. Anecdotally from Florida, they were testing wills on the Florida multiple choice portion, and they were expecting you to create these family trees from your mind because they wouldn't even allow to use scratch paper. So yes, it's completely unfair, but that's part of what our job is, and that is to manage their expectations, to let the students know that this is the reality of what they're facing, and this is what they need to be practicing, how they need to be practicing, rather. With regards to the ESL students, we have several of those at FIU. We have we're a majority school here, and we do have some students that English is their second language, and that is preparing them for the exam is something that again takes time. It's not something that we can fix in the 6-7 weeks that we have left until the February bar exam. But again, the one thing you want to explain to them is it's going to be online. You have to start practicing online and doing everything online so that when you actually take the exam, it's just a version of your practice session. It's your final practice session.
I also think, Melanie, deans, if they keep the communication open with whoever they put in charge of bar prep and or just the students, right? If they continue to communicate with the students, we're in a position to advocate for them about certain things that seem unfair or, most, especially in small states, the Supreme Court and the bar examiners personally. So you're able to just pick up the phone and say, this is what I'm hearing. And hopefully you can advocate as a dean for them, even during this conference, I've seen people advocating to Judy from the National Bar Exam in sessions, so I think deans are very active on trying to advocate for their students. But the big takeaway is for the audience to let your dean know, because sometimes we don't know, about what's going on on the ground level. So just keeping that open flow communication with the graduates and the people who are helping them prepare for the bar is crucial to be able to help them as a dean.
Okay, so the comments are going in two directions, because someone is asking, what can the dean in her isolated role do? And the other way is, wait a minute, why are we, it's good to help them manage their expectations about an online bar exam, but what are we doing to get the feedback about the problems with these exams to the decision makers? So we have two issues on the table. Let's take the second question I just asked first, because I think it was a huge, I don't know if people are aware how much deans were involved in trying to get this information to their courts of appeals and to the decision makers, but it was rough, and I think we were all very involved in New York. All 15 New York law school deans came together, and we started having a weekly call for that purpose. But there were some frustrations along the way, frankly, from really getting feeling like the information was being heard. And I wondered what everyone else's experience was like in trying to make change. Marceline, maybe we'll start with you, simply because I think the diploma privilege was something that bar takers in lots of states were really pushing for. In a few states, and I think, Raul, your state and my state, it was made absolutely clear that was not going to be a consideration. And a lot of my work had to finally switch from advocating for that to getting students to accept it so they would study, instead of signing yet another round of petitions. So Marceline, how did that experience go? And were the deans influential in getting that diploma privilege through?
Oh, absolutely. As I said, we were meeting weekly. And so Susan said, we're a smaller state, just 3 law schools. And we were meeting weekly with the Board of Bar Examiners and, trying to make small changes along the way. And then when it became evident to us that we really needed to go all the way to diploma privilege, then that's when we petitioned the Supreme Court. And she's absolutely right that we know all of the actors in our state. Know them very well, and they know our law schools very well. And so that was absolutely the case, that it was perhaps easier for us to engage in that dialogue because of our pre-existing relationships. So I know, our dean of students was always working with our assistant dean, rather, for student affairs was always working with the Board of Bar Examiners. And then our director of academic excellence, so Professor Megan McAlpin, and Assistant Dean Nicole Commission. But then, just really by happenstance, I decided I really need to get to know these people. And I started to get to know them before the pandemic. And I'm so grateful that I got to know the Board of Bar Examiners a little bit better, because then it was, easier to have, full and frank discussions. And just as in New York, the law deans here, we met regularly also. And that was really important. And I want to mention another key group of people in all of this, and that was our Office of Career Planning and Professional Development, led by Assistant Dean Becky Ivanoff. So in addition, that was one more group of people that was really touching base with our students, but they were also touching base with potential employers, because you have to remember that not everyone was excited about the diploma privilege. And so really starting to socialize that with our employers, and why it was that we weren't concerned that we were just about to let a bunch of incompetent people loose on society. And then also being able to come back to our students and say that we've been in communication with employers. And so that also helped lower their anxiety. So when you think about the things that they were worried about, not just the exam, but now we have diploma privilege. Will my employer still accept it? Will my employer insist that once there's an all clear that I have to go now and take a bar exam. So they were a really important part of our effort. And I think as the dean, one of my roles was important in bringing all those people within the law school community together and making sure that it wasn't just falling on one or two people, but that we all were out there trying to really help our students and interact with those who were in a position to make decisions.
That's great. Thank you. And so let's talk about the other question that the comments have raised, which is, sorry, I want to make sure I get that. How can deans be most helpful to bar exam takers this February and in the summer? We are constrained in what we can do with students in that we have people at the school who are student facing and that's their job, and we're kind of split in a million directions. So what's the most important thing, and anyone can feel free to hop in and answer this, what's the most important thing a dean can do?
Well, I think, like I mentioned earlier, getting a good person in charge of it. So that person can get to you as the dean. And they can be the point of contact for the vendors, and they can advocate with the vendors, advocate for the students, and then come to you if there's ways that the dean needs to be involved. So I think that would be a really good idea if you don't have one person that's helping the bar takers to point a person.
I'm curious, because a lot of schools don't have many schools have directors of academic success or academic excellence, but don't have a separate person who works just on bar prep. I'm just curious as to how your schools do that. At my school, we just have academic success. We don't have a separate person devoted to the bar. Can you just describe how they work at your school?
Yeah, that's the same with us. I mean, this person does academic success and bar passage. It'd be great. We only have about 460 total students. Mm-hmm. So like the entering class was 167, to give you an idea. The graduating class was probably pretty small this year, so a little over 100. But she's having to do a lot. It's really should be two jobs, yeah. Honestly. But we just started a poor state school, so I don't have the resources to do two yet.
What about at Oregon?
We have one person in one program that we just started when I came 3 years ago, and it is my great hope that we will be adding another person very soon, because it is, and that's still not enough, but it'll be better than one person. And so, as I said, also that student affairs has been very active before we started this program. Academic affairs has been very active, and so we really try to get a core group of people involved throughout the law school, but we are hoping to expand the program. And to the question of, what can we do for the February takers? I think Raul's, advice about practice the way you're going to take the test, that's absolutely something that we need to be reinforcing with the students. And also there's the opportunity to counsel students to talk about whether or not they're actually ready for the February bar. And there are lots of factors that one has to take into account with making that decision, but letting them know and helping them work through whether or not this is the best decision for them right now to take the bar in February. And it may be that the best thing for them to do is to wait for July. And that's a really hard conversation to have, but I think it's indeed our responsibility to have that conversation with those students. We've been working with them. We know what their struggles are, what their challenges are. Hopefully we've been, in good communication with them. And so we really understand, where they are, and that we will be supportive in whatever decision that they make, but opening the door to say, this might not be the right time for you to take the exam.
That's interesting.
If I can jump in and add one extra thing as to what deans can do to support their grads, I think the one thing I would say is be present. And that is be with them throughout the entire process by communicating with them every week. For our July October takers, we had our dean Anthony Page doing town hall sessions with them. We had him emailing them, just letting them know that he's been in touch with the bar examiners, that he's thinking about them, that he's fighting for them. With his blessing, I started a GoFundMe for our students. We raised over $5,000 to help students who needed help with expenses for health insurance, rent, internet access for their exam. And so all that not only shows that they're in this together as a team, it shows that the law school still supports them after the bar exam. And not to mention, it's great for the Alumni Association too.
Yeah, great point.
Can I just make one quick point?
Yeah.
Because I would be sort of remiss as the well-being person on this panel not to raise this, but I think this is something that, people don't necessarily want to think about, but, like we tell lawyers that they have to take care of themselves so they can take care of their clients to be most effective, law deans have to take care of themselves too. And I think, that's something that is sort of easily put aside, right, when you are having to support all of these students and faculty and while in the midst of a pandemic and all these changes. But I do think it's really important, and it's also really important in terms of modeling well-being so that your students understand that it's important.
How could a dean effectively model well-being for their students? Any thoughts?
I think, I've seen a lot of schools providing great resources around, specifically like individual well-being, like offering free Headspace accounts, right, for meditation, or providing places to do yoga. And if you have a dean who's actually participating in that, right, maybe the dean comes to the meditation session, right, and is there doing the meditation with the students, right, and demonstrating that they do this too, and they are working on self-care as well. So little things where they're involved with these different activities.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, Melanie,
Yes.
I've gone on our walking club with them. I've done the yoga with them. So they see me. They see me leave the office a lot of time in workout clothes, if I'm going to go on a walk after work. So they see me dressed really down and not as looking like a dean. And I think sometimes it's just been helpful when I've been with student groups to talk about my vulnerabilities. That yes, there's an imposter syndrome. Yes, when I look at Dean Duncan, I really can't believe that I'm the dean, and, are they going to find out that I really don't know how to do this job? And, just being honest with them so they see that I make mistakes. And when I have to tell them, I made a mistake. I think if they see that you're not so scary and that you're this authoritative figure, but you're just a real human being. I mean, I've cried in front of an SBA president once because, there was just a lot going on. And I was so embarrassed, when I did it. I was like, oh, I cannot believe I'm crying in front of you. But I think it really made him realize that I have feelings too, and there's stress. And this was a big issue, and they were being really harsh. And I think it calmed everything down because he saw me just be real.
Okay, there's a question here. Oh, Marcy Lynn, yeah.
I was just going to jump in and say, I had a 365-day green and yellow social media challenge. And so that was a way in which I could also show that, yes, I just came from a walk, yes, how these things are impacting me. So it was a way to sort of let people see into me personally. The other thing is our SBA, our Student Bar Association, has been doing a lot of work around wellness. And so as the dean, to be supportive of those efforts and to encourage faculty, as Heidi was saying, how they were taking moments at the beginning of class to highlight wellness issues. And so that's another way in which the dean can model that, is to be supportive and to, be the one who sends that message to the community about the wellness initiatives, and just let them know that I'm trying to take care of myself and I want you to take care of yourself too.
Great. This says, I'll read it to you. I'm not entirely clear which way the question goes, but as deans, are we interested in data nationally that would provide information about any intersections between race, gender, and choosing not to take the bar or not passing the bar during the pandemic. I mean, I think we would all be interested. I'm not clear if the questioner is saying we would be interested in getting that information, which I think we would all say absolutely, or are we interested in helping to create a database of that information of some kind? Any thoughts on that? Heidi's doing this, so Heidi.
Well, it's sort of this is one of the initiatives that our committee is working on here in Massachusetts, not nationally, but we finally for the first time have now implemented a demographic and law practice survey as part of our bar registration, not the bar application yet, but for the actual registration. And so that is now required. So we're actually we will actually have demographics on our attorneys, and then so there's two other pieces of that we're hoping to pursue, and one is to actually get the demographic information as part of the bar application process, and then also have the demographic information of law schools, so that we can look at all of those together and then analyze that and see what that tells us. But I absolutely think that it is extremely important to have that. We talk about sort of increasing the diversity of our profession, which we are extremely concerned about, particularly here in Massachusetts. Also, we're also concerned about a lot of our law students come here to Massachusetts and then they leave, and we have a lot of students of color who do so because of one of the reasons is because of sort of the historic racism in Boston. So those are things that we'd like to change, and I think the data is going to be really important because it's going to tell us a story and help us then advocate for changes.
Great. Anyone else on this?
Melanie, I think that, a few years ago now, although my sense of time is highly distorted, but I think it was a couple of years ago, the ABA was talking about gathering bar information and gathering the demographics. And one of the concerns about looking at students of color, for example, and disaggregating, right? So looking at specific groups was that at some law schools, those numbers are very small. And so you would really be calling out, very specific people, very small numbers of people. So for example, in Oregon, a state that is overwhelmingly white, we've done a great job at increasing the numbers of students of color. But if you start to disaggregate them, that is a challenge. So while we can look at our own school and look at our own data, when we try to start rolling it up and then bringing it all together, that is one of the challenges with that effort.
Anyone else on this question?
I do think we can head towards that goal also if we start pushing the bar examiners in each jurisdiction to start reporting their data on a gender and race basis. And I'm thinking of the state of California here, who releases their bar results not only by sheer numbers of people who took it, but also race and gender. And that's really if we can start cross-referencing that with ABA reports to figure out a lot of that data, and that will give us sort of a quasi-standardized national repository for that. But it's hard to get these bar examiners to move on issues like that. I only know of a handful of states that report data in that manner.
We also think that we're seeing some trends that we didn't like. And so we were thinking about getting mentors. So people that are similarly situated, that have been successful studying for the bar, that could work with our graduates. So more recent grads could be paired up and help them with the studying and being accountable. And so I do think that the data would be very important to see nationwide, but then we need to come up with solutions. I think I can identify that there's the problem I'm seeing, but how do we get over that is, to me, the more important question, because I think probably we can guess what we would see if we collected it.
Right. I think I agree with you, Susan.
Can I chime in on that? Just a real quick sort of, moving that point forward, Susan, this is something that we also really focused on over the summer in terms of supporting particularly Black law students in our Massachusetts law schools and providing specific resources. So we actually had our Massachusetts Bar Association and our Boston Bar Association they were providing coaching specific and mentorship specifically for Black law students. And we did a specific program on challenges for Black law students specifically taking the bar exam and helping them to prepare, including sort of mental health issues, which included sort of racial trauma and then strategies and specific like bar prep sessions for them as well, which we did in collaboration with some of our affinity bars. So I think, that was really important and should continue.
Thank you, Heidi. This is a question, Raul, that's Florida specific, I think. It says most high stakes test creators make preparation materials available that potential examinees can get for free or available for purchase. Florida does not do a great job of supplying multiple choice questions and answer analysis. How can we get our State Board of Examiners to remedy this?
I've been trying to do that for 10 plus years. What the bar examiners in Florida do release are questions that, in my opinion, were released because they were defective somehow. And you can count them on 3 pairs of hands. Literally 30 or some odd questions in the past couple of years have been released. And every time you look at them, you say, well, the reason it was released is because it's arguably answer B or C that was correct. And they are very hesitant to release these types of materials for some reason. In fact, I want to say it was probably 2 years ago, I met with the chairman of the Florida Board of Bar Examiners, as well as its executive director. And I specifically asked him, why won't you release the essay grading grids that you use on each bar examination, given that you're never going to use those again? And I was excited when the chairman of the Board of Bar Examiners said, I'm going to look into that and I'll get back to you. And when they got back to me, it was the answer is, well, we're not going to release those to you. And so there's no good reason for it. I think maybe they're concerned that law schools will start teaching to the test. But that presumes that you know exactly what's going to be on the test. And no one really knows what's going to be on the test. I know con law is going to be on the test, but that's too broad of a subject to really teach to a test. Nor do I think we should be teaching to a test. I think that the test should be an analytical type of test to really test whether the students have mastered the fundamentals of legal analysis using basic rules as the foundation for that analysis. But it has to come from the deans. It has to come from what I call my higher ups, because if we've learned anything during this pandemic is that the Board of Bar Examiners and Supreme Courts don't listen to the students. They're not lawyers, they're applicants. And so in their view, I think there is some sort of bias there for them. But if it starts coming from the deans, if we start having the deans pressure these boards and their Supreme Courts, there's a better argument for why these things have a good educational value. And you can look at my articles, my colleagues' articles about why the testing effect and other things really do help our students. But I think it has to start from there. And I think that person's absolutely right. We need those materials to help our students learn what they need to get licensed.
I'm going to jump in and say someone has posted that, as you know, we're up against that other conversation right now that's going on about the NCBE. And so they said in that session right now, people are asking why the NCBE doesn't A, release essay grading rubrics, or B, collect gender race data on MBA on the MBA day to provide large scale data. And I think this brings together really everything we're talking about here, that there's a role for deans in this. This is a perfectly appropriate and effective way for deans to use their times to come together to push for those two things. So maybe something will come out of this group and the discussion in the other room that's going on.
And I don't know if our audience knows this, but the deans have been meeting as a group. Gosh, when did we start meeting, you all? In March or something? That we've been meeting for a while. Wasn't it weekly? And then, it's been every other week or something. So I've seen more dean interaction than I've ever seen in the 9 years I've been a dean. So I'm really hopeful that we can unite on some of these common issues and use our meetings to advocate. And sometimes the National Bar Examiners are on that meeting with us, so it seems like we're at a different spot than we've ever been before as far as deans really coming together as a group. Right. I don't know. Do you think that, Melanie? And I don't know, Marceline, if y'all think that.
No, we were doing the weekly New York Dean's call and then the national call, and I've never had that experience. It's been really wonderful. It's a bright spot to come out of all of this, the increased communication and working together.
Absolutely.
This question is, sorry. The graduates have felt betrayed by all these changes going on with the bar and the way that they're happening. I would add the lack of communication and then the sudden switches and changes. But this questioner points out the Board of Bar Examiners have felt unfairly attacked in their work. How do we work on reform together, if at all? And I'll just say that I find this to be a fascinating question because we had moments when we thought we were working effectively with our Court of Appeals or our bar examiners in New York, and then we would accidentally proceed in a way that would hurt feelings or cause backlash that wasn't intended. Any thoughts on that?
I think that trying to identify what our common goals are, and as I said, that it was quite coincidental that I'd started to get to know the board, of bar examiners before the pandemic, so that, building those relationships. And so that even if you do say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, that people are going to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? And so that we have to extend some grace in both directions. And I think that's absolutely the case. As Susan said, with the deans are communicating more frequently, that this is a time we shouldn't stop communicating with our boards of bar examiners, that we should continue to think about what's the best way to serve our students and what's the best way to serve the public, because we all have those interests at heart.
Great. Someone posted that maybe the reason they don't want to release sample answers is because they're afraid of being accused by getting an onslaught of law professors telling them that they got the answers wrong. There might be some truth in that, but that I don't think is a reason not to do it, right? I've often wondered about some of the questions of some of the answers on the bar, but that could very well be just a thought. Okay, so
I can just chime in on that last question, by the way. The not necessarily in terms of how the relationships between the deans and the Board of Bar Examiners, but the relationship between the Board of Bar Examiners and the students. I know that one of the things, particularly here in Massachusetts, that our BBE is really trying to change is sort of how they're seen, their perception by the students, that they're an entity that is not necessarily trying to keep people out, right? But they're trying to help them get in. And so they want to be more open to dealing with concerns, and they want people not to be afraid of the BBE. And I think that starts with having them be really involved with the students early in law school, right? Not waiting until their 3L year to actually bring someone in from the BBE to talk, and to have them, have a relationship with them early on. So it's not just about, this test, it's about their transition from law school into the practice, and they're the piece that's going to help with that transition.
Great. So question, I just mentioned that something good, and Susan has said that something good that came out of all of this horribleness was increased communication among law school deans, and a great increase in us all working together. What else has come out of this that we will keep? Our responses to students, the way that we've responded, had to pivot, the way we've helped them. Have you had any experiences or done something where suddenly you thought, you know what, we should always be doing this, or this is something, a lesson learned that we can apply more broadly, even if there's not a pandemic? And I won't call on you. I'll let you think for a minute, and then whoever. Susan's ready, I think.
Well, one thing is, I think before the pandemic, the majority of our faculty would have said you could not teach online. It won't work. It's not going to be any good. There's no way. And I think some of them have really changed and seen that, wow, there are some great techniques. And if you're trained, it can be very effective. And they've seen some of the more reserved students be able to answer questions. And somebody told me one day that they still get things wrong, but you don't see that panic when they get called on because they are at home and maybe feel more comfortable and don't feel as in a spotlight. So I think some things are good. I don't think we'll ever have a totally online school, and I wouldn't like that. But with a school like Mississippi, where you're not in the capital and not where the attorneys are, it could be great to have 3Ls down in Jackson, Mississippi, and let them take some of these classes online. And that probably would have been a non-starter before the pandemic. But now, maybe, that we could get there. So I think there are some silver linings for sure.
Great. Anyone else?
I could say that one of the things that has been great, or because for example, our career team had one-on-one, we're able to have one-on-one meetings with all of our graduates, right? They did it in like a week's time. They were exhausted, mind you. So I said, next time, let's spread that out. But it was a lot easier to get those one-on-one meetings via Zoom, right? Rather than getting them into their office. And so that was a great opportunity to support students, to find out where they were. And so I hope that we continue to do that, use this as a tool. And then the other thing is that just before I came to Oregon, the state had lowered the cut score. We're still on the high end of the cut score, but we lowered the cut score. And the Supreme Court has a task force for us to study that change and whether or not we should lower it again, because they lowered it in the face of the pandemic. And they also asked that we form a task force to study diploma privilege as a permanent offering in Oregon. So I think those are really great things to come out of the pandemic, that they are really seriously looking at diploma privilege as an option going forward, as well as lowering the cut score so that we are more in line with the majority of jurisdictions.
And just to add that California also lowered the cut score and had a historically high pass rate this year. Any other lessons, things we'll keep?
Well, I'll just chime in and say that my hope is that, and I think I've seen this particularly in the schools that we're working with here, is that there is more attention and acknowledgement of law student well-being and how to really support students. And so I think this is a great moment to really think about how we change law school culture to better support students and sort of shift away from this sort of suffering or toughing out mentality, and help students figure out how to take care of themselves, and also to educate faculty that there might be multiple factors that affect student performance, and it's not just their own diligence, right? There's systemic racism, there's financial issues, there's work commitments, there's family, there's anxiety, in addition to this pandemic, right? There are a lot of things that play into that. So I do hope this is a moment that we can kind of use to again kind of move the needle here.
Great. Anyone else? Anything that we want to keep?
And I would just add that while we've seen a lot of things that we actually do want to keep, there's things that we also have to be keenly aware of, and that is the technology gap with our students and how some of them can and cannot access the resources that they are going to need going forward under what I think is going to be a semi-permanent paradigm. And this is particularly true given, I think, the changes that the NCBE wants to make to their exam. And of course, they could be contradicting me completely in the other session. But from what I garnered, it's going to be a computer-based exam. And, going back to that question we had earlier in terms of students being able to take the exam on computers and whatnot, I think now is the opportunity, or rather the signal that we have, that we need to start a good transition to these students to be able to do these these tasks by way of computer.
Great. So we only have a few minutes left. So let me ask you, it's a little bit off topic, but I think not too far off. What are you thinking about graduation? It was a very hard time for all of us for those 2020 graduates. What are we going to do? What are your thoughts? I'm going to call on Marceline because I know what she's going to say. And so we'll start with you.
Thanks, Leslie. Yes, I emailed our 3Ls and LLM students on Monday, I think it was, to let them know that we are planning for a virtual commencement. And we made that decision, taking into account, of course, all health and safety considerations in the state of the pandemic, and also wanting to be able to go ahead and form a committee with faculty, staff, and students so that we could plan for the best possible experience, unlike the spring in which, we were scrambling and did the very best that we could under the circumstances. And so I know that people are disappointed and upset by that decision. And I've had at least one parent actually reach out to me. But one of the things too is to remember we're in Oregon, and we would be one of the more cautious states. At least our governor is leading us in a more cautious manner. And about 75% of our students come from out of state. So we're not talking about a lot of state schools where most of the people can hop in the car and drive over. We're talking about planes, trains, and automobiles to get here. And to encourage that. And right now, I believe that we're supposed to quarantine for 2 weeks when we enter the state. So we went ahead and made that very difficult decision, believing that it is in the best interest of our community.
Susan.
Well, I have to follow what the university does, first of all, so I can't make my own decision. And we're from the South, and we are really optimistic people. So we will be in the Grove on May 1st for 2021 and May 8th for 2020. And we have the least amount of vaccinations given so far. So I think things are going to turn around quickly, and we are going to be there in person. But you might want to talk to me in April and see how we're doing about that. But right now, we're full steam ahead in person in the Grove. So, I'm sure it'll look different. We'll have to wear masks and stuff, but they think it's going to be in person. So we'll see. I'll let you know.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We're at our last minute, so I want to say thank you so much to all of the panelists for that really helpful discussion, and wish everyone the best of luck as we continue to soldier on through this. And best of luck to your students, to your states, and to a quick vaccine rollout. So take care, everyone. Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year, if not before. Okay, bye.